talked about it that we both stand for the same thing. You know, TaylorMade has a lot of belief in building things right the first time around, selling what's right to the customer, not selling clubs one after the other. They'll rather people stay on one set that works until they change. So it kind of follows a lot of our philosophy around skill over equipment. And it's ironic they do that because they're an equipment company, right? So their entire purpose is to sell equipment, but at the same time they respect the idea that, you know, at the end of the day, you don't want to sell ice to Eskimos.
All hands on deck.
We are in the promised land.
And the cool thing with TaylorMade is sit face balanced or square.
Should we bring stuff?
It's full on,
By the way,
I'm Ben.
and then
Nice to meet you.
I'm Ian, nice to meet you.
Nice to meet you, mate.
I'm probably the highest handicapper out of the three of us.
Yep.
I'm a mid to high handicapper.
Cool.
Ian's a single digit,
Yep.
and Dan's our resident tour expert.
Yeah.
So we technically don't actually need clubs fitted,
Yeah.
per se, but it's more the fact that we've got three different skill levels.
How different it can be from one.
And why, and what's the real value of doing this? And,
Yep.
you know, like when you buy technology, future-proofing is a big concept, but with clubs, and technically clubs are tech.
Yep.
How does future-proofing look like?
Yep.
And it's different because I need a lot more future-proofing than Dan will.
Yeah.
In theory, right?
Perfect.
I think personally, for all three of us, we've got different things that we are keen on getting tested. So we don't need an entire full bag. I think for me, it would be the fact that I no longer trust any of my putters.
Okay.
I believe my irons should be maybe lofted down because my path is transformed a lot.
Lie angle wise or
Yeah,
loft wise?
lie
Lie angle
angle-wise.
wise. Cool.
But I don't know if it's tool or whether it's skill.
Yeah, okay.
And that's part of it. At what point do I go get a new set or do I get better?
I think the irony with lie angles, and you'll see it in a second, is most people will deliver the club almost the same way in terms of lie angles.
Yes.
But their impact position changes across the face, and that's where they lose their efficiency. So we could have a guy hitting 50 shots. If he's a somewhat okay golfer and it's semi-repeatable swings, you'll actually see the club, and you'll see it on gears, which is what we're using in a second. The club will be delivered very similar, but the efficiencies are where we impact it on the face and how open and closed the face is. So,
I assume you're not really thinking too much about technique, it's just what they do now.
yeah. And as you said
much as
earlier, there is
possible.
future proofing. It's very different for you, obviously, if you've got an established swing. But for us, it's all about where do we see you now, but how far can you push it? And that can be like the difference of like a Sim 2 max iron to a 790. What happens if we go 790 initially and you focus on it and you're getting better? You'd leave the Sim. This is where a lot of people will leave the old iron behind. You actually start the challenge of not giving you something smaller, but giving you something that might actually catapult you into like the next phase. Does that make sense? Yeah. And we get at the other end. If you're on your way downwards, struggling to play golf, older guy, the clubs are we're sort of gonna work our way back up to our forgiving heads. So it's all relative. And we see it even for a lot of pros that come in, they're not playing a heap of golf like they used to. They're letting the blade go and they work their way back into like a cavity back, all those things. That's sort of where I'm at.
And that's what it's always been about for me. It's not about what iron looks the best or what I
It's what it
should be
does.
using, it's just purely on performance.
Yeah, cool.
So
Egoless golf.
Yeah, awesome.
And how often would you get a coach and a player, or a coach and their players come to do a fitting together?
Pre-COVID, it's a little bit. I think for us, it's more, I'm sort of starting to really see it on the junior side. I'm not really seeing it on like an adult as often. But we're seeing a lot of sneaky, good 14, 15-year-old kids that are just coming in swinging 120 mile an hour. It's just like, where's this coming from? They're like the VIS and all those sorts of players that we're probably getting in, guys that need a real tune-up. But I don't see it for the everyday golfer. I don't see it for like a mid-handicapper or anything.
Is there a lot of value having a coach around when they fit?
Yes and no. If you've got a really good elite player, the coach has visions of where the player's going to go. I don't think that dictates what clubs they play. He's swinging this swing. This club allows him to swing that swing. I don't have to like reinvent the wheel. We find a lot of players when they get fitted, they're swinging a swing that their clubs dictate. And if you can change that to allow the player to dictate the swing, then you fit to the swing. It's almost like the reverse of what a lot of people come here and they expect to be in P1 and all this mumbo jumbo, but at the end of the day, if you can find the club to match the swing, you don't have to like reinvent your whole golf game. You just move forward. And lie angles are the biggest part for irons especially. If you go from standard to 4 degrees upright and you are actually 4 degrees upright, the ball flight is like totally different. You're almost a completely different person. So you'll see it. Yeah. Gears is good. Like this is what we use in the US. Yes. This system is as good as it gets for us. We've got it in all our labs. We'll have it in the Sydney lab very soon as well. So this is for us as these knees. Pair it up with the quad. So we do a fair bit. Initially, we do a fair bit on the biomechanics side of things, and then we'll work our way into not an us versus yours sort of setup, but just where you come from, where you can get to. This is really analytical. Sometimes, as you'll probably tell in a second, it's overkill. Unless you're like really in the biz and you know all the numbers. But sometimes it's just about simplifying things. So we'll get you warmed up.
Yeah, I mean, my advice as a coach would be in a fitting is try to do it as naturally as possible and try not to think too technically. Like
just play like a
literally see what the equipment will be for what is a natural swing. Because that was what Ben was saying before, is that they can actually try to shape the equipment rather than you trying to fight the equipment. So
and I guess that's a good part. It's like, what happens when I do fix this? That is a really interesting point you bring. What do I do?
Yeah, I still think for you, Kev, like it's shortening up the swing is the biggest thing.
Do I do that today?
That I would want you to try to do that today as best you can, because that's going to make a big difference to the equipment that they fit you for.
Yeah.
Like
and at some point I'm going to get that, aren't I?
Yeah. And we don't want you to swing long, and then that could produce a totally different sort of swing speed and rhythm and fit you for that. So that's kind of a big change.
Yeah.
So here's the difference for me as well, is these are off the rack.
So that, yeah, I mean,
not fitted.
Straight away, like we should see some good changes
see what's
there.
going on.
Yeah.
Oh, go for it.
Ian was saying his clubs are off the rack.
7% of our sales in this room are off the rack.
There you go.
Oh, really?
Okay, cool. This is the cool part though. Hang on to that for me. Puts you in a position where we're only looking at raw swings. We're not looking at where it goes. We're not getting our hands closed on one, our hands closed on another. The gear system is basically tracking the club from all angles here. And obviously we've got both TVs, so that won't be too hard for you to see. The irony here, and this is where it gets really interesting, because the everyday golf comes in, it's like, oh, I don't hit it too good, it's not really consistent. What I see on that screen is the ball coming out of the same spot on the face every time. Every time. That sort of starts us off, so we can go, right, reasonable speed, we're hitting it a little high, so we can start to look at maybe shafts that will bring that down. And then we know that if you're working with the coach and moving forward, then we don't have to go too hard or put you in a crowbar. Like a lot of people think when you go and get a fitting that it's just like really calculated and everything's like, yeah, this. And we used to pigeonhole a lot of people. Now it's a bit more organic. We do 22 stiff shafts this year as a brand. Probably 2 or 3 that are actually in your wheelhouse.
So what would be like the next step forward from here? What do I do? Is it a coach thing, or is this a...
It's a combo thing.
Yep.
So we're going to get you into something, I'd never admit defeat really, but what we're going to look at basically is where the 7-iron sits, what it does as a try. Obviously you're looking at something that's sort of very close to in that sort of 790, 770 phase in aesthetics, so that's probably where we'll start. But we've got options of shafts, we've got options of lies.
Okay.
We can work our way through it all good. It is probably a 770. This is strong lofted and you de-lofted enough, so you're probably dress closed and it's going to pronounce that little pull that you've got. Cool. So just stand there, I've barely hung on to that. So you need to trust it'll grab.